Fire Chief here at Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company. And I'd like to call the Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company meeting to order. So we have a variety of folks here. We have members here, we have applicants here, we have a couple of special guests here. And I'd like to introduce our special guests. We have, I think he just walked in, Mr. Gary Curry. Gary, in the back of the room. Gary Curry, if you don't know, is our county administrator. And Gary has been instrumental in helping offer guidance on a variety of different issues to me and to the rest of the board on everything from policy to FOIA to everything else. And he's been absolutely instrumental in helping to get that ambulance back up and running in service. So I want to thank him. And then I also want to acknowledge actually two people, because we have a special guest, Mr. Sean Polster, he'll stand up, and Mr. Darren Stevens. Darren didn't want to stand up all the way because he's wearing shorts. But anyway, if you don't know, Sean Polster was or I guess still is sort of acting, is that correct? No? Assistant Emergency Services Coordinator, which, if you know, is an absolutely important role in this county because he helps bridge all of the volunteer fire and rescue companies together and then works with the sheriff's office as well. Darren is acting in that role, if you did not know, until they find, Darren, if I say this correctly, please, until they recruit and hire a permanent replacement for Sean. So thank you for that. So I'm going to start the first meeting of the Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company after, how long has it been, 5 months?
26th of January.
26, well, since early January, this fire company has not had a membership meeting. And the reason for that, a variety of different things, but there were constraint orders and other things put in place. And so those have been resolved through court case, and I'll talk about that during the chief's portion of this discussion. But this is our first meeting with the newly appointed board. And so if I would, I'm going to introduce the board. We have Dave Bailey, Patrick O'Malley, Dr. Hugh Hill, and Tim Bills. And then I fill the balance of that as the fire chief. So, with regard to meeting minutes, and we're going to follow the agenda. Are there any members in the audience? Yes, Beth. I have copies of the agenda. I have documents for the members. I'm sorry for the applicants, we don't have those. But Beth, I have copies of the agenda and a couple other things that I'll introduce as we go forward. You're welcome to take, please, one copy of each. I know you wanted to get up in front of an entire crowd. Yeah. So, as I was saying, we have no meeting minutes for the last meeting because we did not manage the last meeting. And so as a result, there are no meeting minutes to be read, reviewed, or approved from the last meeting. All right, following the agenda, if you would, Patrick, read the treasurer's report. And I think you have sort of a unique situation, right, because you're going to read several.
Yeah, so for everyone who's a member, this draft, I believe, and in the absence of the treasurer, I've been paying the bills and working with our long-time, several years now, bookkeeper, Patricia Ward-Lynn, who compiles these reports from our bank statements, and also helps us to compile fire levy reports, which are more thorough in that they have every invoice and the receipts, which goes to the fire levy in a couple months. Virtually everything here is normal course of business, existing bills and expenses, the contracts that we had, the services, the phone, internet, etc. So the only aberration on this entire thing is that we have an annual tanker installment due in March. phone, and they accidentally debited it from both of our accounts. So, without talking to membership about it, what that amounts to is that we've actually had a net benefit to us instead of having our tanker payment interest accruing at 4% and earning 0.1% in our savings account for the last 3 or 4 months in absence of a membership meeting where we can bring it to the members. We basically had a double payment. If it were monopoly, it would be a bank error in your favor. We can choose to have it unwound according to United Bank, or we can just, it's basically an extra payment of principal so that we're accruing less interest on that note. So that's something we can discuss at this meeting or in the future. Everything else, if members want to review it or have questions, there's 4 months here. We don't have the June yet. Patricia is very hardworking and is taking her summer vacation, so she hasn't put it together, but again, it would look extremely similar to everything you see here. I don't know if people do have questions about it. I need a minute to look it through.
If you would, Patrick, just read the account balances, I think that's helpful.
Okay.
So that everybody has, we have, is it 3 or 4 accounts?
We have 3 accounts and 2 CDs. So the way it's been set up traditionally, we have our main checking account that is all the operational expenses. Then we have what we refer to as the fundraising account. That has been inactive since January 26th. You'll see a few carryovers. That's actually in the January report. And then lastly, we have what we call the tanker account, which is just a savings account, which has a large balance that we have annual installments. And that tanker account has almost as much money as the outstanding balance of our tanker loan. So we began roughly the period where we took over with $89,000 in the checking account. That's gone up and down. We recently deposited the first quarter Rappahannock County, the payment we get from Rappahannock through the fire levy. So the ending balance you see in the last report here, which is the end of May, is $25,000 short of what's actually in it now. Basically, you know, are we wanting to discuss exact balances as?
Just the overall balance.
Okay, well, I mean, publicly, what I'm saying. But there's $7,400 in the fundraising account. There's $180,000 in the tanker account. And throughout the course of the last 4 or 5 months, various expenses, we ended May with $70,000 in the checking account. It's our operational account. Do any of the members have questions about that?
Can I, if I may, can I add a caveat to that report? So that everybody knows, and you may not all be affluent, but it's important that we understand that pretty much from the onset of this new board that you see before you, and I should have introduced, and I'm so sorry, I didn't introduce Tawana Williams.
I'm not on the board.
No, she's not, but I've asked her to be sort of a scribe for us because we have not had an election and we have not been able to have a secretary officially elected, so I asked her to capture the meeting notes. I will say one sidebar about Tawana is she has been absolutely phenomenal since day one. She stepped up, helped us find things that we couldn't find, research things that we needed to be researched, and she's just been a true godsend to us, I think to all 5 of us. Sorry, but we're getting calls in between this, so we have to decide who's going to go. And I'll add one more sidebar. If we get an EMS call, Tim Bills has agreed to take that call. If we get something more significant, structure, fire, or something like that, then unfortunately I'll have to adjourn the meeting, take that call, and then reconvene the meeting at some other time. Obviously, life safety comes first. So I'm going to wait for Tim to come back just in case. I don't think it's our call. Sorry about this, but this is the true life of operations. We have apps on our phone that can track all the calls that are coming and going. I'm sorry?
You need someone to move to accept treasurer's report.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I move to accept treasurer's report.
Yes, can I have a motion? And this, these votes, so that everyone in the room knows, we have an inordinate balance of members versus applicants. And so only members are allowed to vote on these. Now our call to commence, so let me just. I'm sorry, they're doing Tony's checks. So only members can vote. Non-applicants and visitors are not allowed to vote. So do I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report? First, second. Second by Joe. Any discussion? Pass. All in favor?
Aye.
Tim, we just need to vote on the, right. Any opposed? None. Okay. All right, Tim, since you just walked back in the room, if you would, read our, with regard to membership and membership report, we have, I'll call it a very positive, but inordinate amount of new applicants to the Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company. Some of the folks are in the room, some of the folks could not make it to the meeting, but Tim Dills is going to read the names of the applicants to the Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company.
I apologize right off the bat if I get your name wrong. James or Jim Allenby, Irina Bonarenko, Travis Brown, Matthew Kaplans, Diane L. Carter, J. Drew Tafel, Catherine E. Tafel, John G. Coffer, James Durdayan, Betsy Deedle, William M. Deedle, Debbie Donahue, Robert S. Dove, Philip D. Eberhardt, Susan S. Fitzgerald, Mark R. Giambroni, Michael D. Goodwin, Priscilla Goodwin, Herbert S. Hickson, Fran M. Krebsner, Stephen B. Lott, Ann E. Lyon, Thomas C. Lyon, Ian T. McDaniel, Carolyn S. Miller, Christopher H. Payne, Byron Perry, Dwayne Prather, Catherine V. Rosemont, Michael W. Sands, Elijah W. Settle, Richard Bubby Lee Settle, Richard Lee Settle Jr., Neil A. Simmons, Charles W. Smoot, Charles Garrett Smoot, Lori L. Smoot, Jeffrey J. Trandle, and Patricia A. Fort Lynn. That's 39 new applicants.
So there are actually 42 people's name on the list. 3 of us are new applicants, but appointed members to the company. So as a result, there are actually 42 new members supposed to come in. So what we do for everyone is we have what's called the first reading, and then we have a second reading. And in the period between that, we do, per our bylaws, we do background checks on folks to make sure these are public trust positions. And so as a result, we go through that process. And so the list that Tim read constitutes our notification to the company and essentially to the community that we have new applicants that want to come in to become members in a variety of sources. And so that you understand, there are about 5 or so different types of membership. First, we start with junior members who are young adults under the age of 18. Then we have contributing members. Those are folks that help support the company but don't run operationally and run calls. Then we have, let's see, our lifetime members, but our lifetime members are a whole different category of people. They're individuals who have served 20 years or more in this company. So, and we have several of those. And then we have, if I may, then we have honorary members, and those are folks in unique situations that may bring benefit or value to the fire company through their notoriety or whatever in their business or otherwise. And so those names that were read off are the applicant list. We go through the scrutiny of this checks and balances process that we put these applicants through. And at the other end of that, in the next meeting, we make a vote. We don't vote on these tonight, but we make a vote to determine whether or not they're eligible for membership. Any questions about that? Thank you. Okay, Chief's report. We have run 100, since January the 27th, I'll have that. We've run 149, or we've been dispatched on 149 fire and EMS calls. The trend compared to, say, last year, I've asked Juana to help me track performance metrics on how many calls we run this year versus how many calls have been run and dispatched last year. We're about 83% more calls this year for whatever reason. It's the community in need. But last year at this time, we were about 85 or 86 calls. Today we're at 149 dispatch calls. Of those calls, 104 are EMS related or medical related, and then 45 of those are fire and rescue. So that can include everything from an inside gas leak in a house to a structure fire to an auto accident. So you can imagine the wide range of things that we have. We also track how many calls each person runs, and so there's a list up here. If you'd like to look at this after the meeting, you're welcome to look at this. We give these to the members. Beth, you've got a copy. Joe, you hopefully got a copy. And for the board, we'll make sure you get copies as well. So that's what we have going on there. Now, let's see where. We don't, like I talked about early on, we really don't have any meeting minutes from last month because we didn't have a last month meeting or any preceding month for 5 months. But there is what I would consider operational old business, and that is that we had to put, and it ties to something that Patrick talked about, we had to put new batteries in the engine or the fire truck, what you see as a traditional fire truck here. In that fire truck, you have 6 essentially industrial batteries to get that thing started, because starting a fire truck is sort of a Herculean lift, Tom will tell you. And when we're about 2 or 3 weeks in, Tim, would you say? And fire truck wouldn't start. So we put it on what we call a jump line, which is a power line to sort of keep everything warm and batteries fresh. And immediately after unplugging that fire truck from the shoreline, fire truck wouldn't start. So I called a mechanic in, he came in and identified that we had dead batteries. Of the 6, 5 were dead. What we found is that those batteries hadn't been replaced for 9 years. And to me that's a little shocking, because I wouldn't let the battery in my tractor go for 9 years, more or less, in a fire truck that's in emergency response. Thankfully, our mechanic, his name is Scotty, was very responsive, came in, replaced all 6 of those batteries, and we were back up and running within just about 2 hours. So thankfully we have a good mechanic on staff. We have, yes sir. Yeah, okay. So we have, and we'll continue to host CPR training classes here. I introduced Sean Colster and Darren Stevens, and they've been very, very helpful to organize CPR training classes here in this room. We had our first class and had, I think, 10 students in that class. So we had 10 new CPR certified, either affiliates or members, essentially overnight after that training. Then we had one new firefighter that I haven't seen. Brian, is Brian Davis in the room? No. Brian Davis, as part of his firefighter one training class, that training also includes CPR. So he's trained, and then myself, I was trained when I arrived here. So we actually have 13 new CPR trained people coming just out of this station, which for a small community like Flint or Rappahannock County, that's a big lift. I think Gary Curley would agree that. One big jump of 13 new people with that capability is a big deal. We also hosted, and we're continuing to host a series of new training because we have an audience like this with a lot of new applicants. But we hosted a basic pump operator class. That is people that can operate the pumps on the fire trucks. Tied to that is what we call EVOC, or Emergency Vehicle Operators course. And EVOC is the driving part of it, and basic pump operator is the operations of that truck's capability. And so we had 5 people attend that class. So I had Tim Bills in that class, Dave Bailey, Hugh Hill, who else did we have? Charles, yeah, Drum, and Charles Ross. So, Charles Swinson. So, that's a massive win for this small Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company to have that many people trained that quickly. We've had a couple of other training classes that have taken place. And so our focus and my focus in this role was to revitalize the Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company. And you can interpret revitalization as many things, but it's stabilized. What I described in the revitalization plan is if you have business vernacular in your background, is the crawl, walk, run phases of business. In the crawl phase, we came in here for the first 60 days, we stabilized the company. We made sure we had control of the books. Patrick took care of that. We made sure that we knew where the bylaws were and everything else that is associated with this fire company and how we're going to do business. Meanwhile, Tim and I are on the operational side of things, looking at things like dead batteries on fire trucks, making sure that we had our mechanic come in and clear the equipment for running calls, because we hadn't touched that equipment before. And it's expensive equipment. If you know or don't know how much a fire truck costs, a basic fire truck now, I was told, is anywhere between $750,000 to upwards over $1 million. So you want to be very cautious in how you operate that equipment. And so we had a mechanic come in and do that. But Tim and I worked on the operational side to stabilize things in that first 60 days. At the same time, the entire board here is out, we'll call it pounding the pavement, I think is the notion they used in one of the articles, but it was to recruit you. And obviously what these gentlemen did paid dividends because you're in this room. And so I want to thank them for doing what you've done. So with 42 new applicants, we have a lot of training to do. That's our phase 2. Our phase 2 is from day 61 until about the first year. And if you ever watched one of the board supervisor meetings in Debbie in the last 5 months, you'll know that I brief the board supervisors every month at their board supervisor meeting. Sometimes I get a little bit beat up in them, and sometimes I don't, and that's okay. But I tell them sometimes these same stories about the training, about the stabilization of this company, about making sure that when we roll out the door, that we are trained, equipped, and we have the skill sets to do the job that we need to do. The last thing you want is somebody rolling up on your house or your barn when it's on fire and not knowing what to do with it. So training is absolutely vital to us and will continue to be a priority for this group. So we have other training classes, as I mentioned. We have CPR classes planned. Kat and I were talking just the other day about upcoming, and Randy Norman and others, about upcoming CPR classes. For those of you who don't know, CPR is basically the first thing you need to walk in that door operationally. You gotta have it. It's just a prerequisite to becoming an active member in the organization. From that, we build on other things. Whether you want to go down operationally, if you want to go down the EMT route or paramedic route, or if you want to go down the firefighter route, and learn things like heavy tactical rescue and confined space and high angle rescue and things like that, we can offer those kind of classes as well. Now, we offer training here in this county through the Rappahannock County Fire and Rescue Association. It's not the only source, and we leverage any source we can get to offer you training. For instance, we have a gentleman who's one of the names that Tim read off as a new applicant. He's in Montana getting wildland firefighter training now. He's coming back, and I've already got him a training slot at the Fauquier County Fire and Rescue Training Academy to become a firefighter. So we're willing to look far and wide to find these kinds of. This is Miss Williams. She's one of our juniors, and probably embarrassed that she walked in the middle of it. But we look far and wide to find training opportunities that will benefit the company, but the reality is that they benefit our community, whether it's Flint Hill and Huntley, or whether it's entire Rappahannock County, and sometimes beyond, right? Because we get dispatched on other county calls as needed. So we are always looking for those kinds of things, training opportunities that will benefit the company. A lot of those training classes are certified classes. Some are lifetime certification, some are short-term. EMT, as an example, is a 5-year training certification. Firefighter in this state is a lifetime certification. So it really depends on how you approach things, determines the frequency of your training and the continuing education requirements that you look for as an applicant or as a member. So just be aware as you come on board, after hopefully a very positive second reading of your application, that there are training opportunities abound for you here in this company and in this county, and we'll find whatever fits your need best. Now, that said, not every one of you is going to want to run fire and EMS. It's just not in your bailiwick. It's just not your wheelhouse of things to do. We have to go through a process of what we call affiliation. Affiliation is you acknowledging the fact that you want to become a member in the company, and you get a background check done, and there's some basic things like CPR. That's okay. You go through that process. Some people want to go further. Some people want to become firefighters. Some people want to become EMTs and paramedics, and that's okay. But not everyone has to do that. Some people just want to help raise money for the company or support, cooking meals for firefighters on long-time structure fires or long-term calls that we can be on. And as an example, we were on a structure fire in Chester Gap, and we were on the call the first time that day for little over 8 hours. 10, was it about 8 hours? Dave was with me the whole time, about 8 hours. And then we went back there 4 hours later, or 3 hours later for another 4 hours, because it rekindled the school call. So there's an opportunity for everybody to contribute to this company. I jokingly say you have to be 16 because that's what the Virginia Code requires. I don't care what the other number is. Really, truly, sincerely, don't care what the other number is, as long as it's not a dash, if you know what I mean. And I say that jokingly. But the reality is, everybody, we are sampling, if you look around this room, we're a sampling of this community. And everybody brings value to this company. If it's doing back office work, it's doing support services in the kitchen, if it's fleet management, if it's grounds management, whatever the variable is, everybody brings value to this company. And I hope that that's one of the reasons we've been so successful in recruiting 42 new applicants in one shot, is because of that notion, of that idea. What's Jimmy's name? Is William Deagle in the room? No. Daughter? Daughter? That's it? Nice to meet you. So I'm going to tell a story about my dad, if I may. Bill Deagle is, I think, and we're doing some research, I think he is the oldest applicant to a volunteer fire company in this country. At the time of his application, he was 96 years old. And to me, Chuck Jackson's here somewhere. To me, that's worthy of an article in and of itself. Talk about the greatest generation and the fact that people are willing to give at 96 years old. God bless that man. And I hope that inspires other people to come in here, not just this firehouse, but any firehouse in this community, and anybody that reads an article, because one of the editors of the paper is here, that inspires people to want to volunteer for their community. So I say God bless your dad for stepping up and helping out. Do we have any questions about what I've talked about? I know I shared a fair amount. Hopefully it was straightforward enough. I see. Yes, from the members, I'm sorry. Well, questions from anybody. if they-
No, not till we adjourn.
Okay. This is, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, Dr. Hugh Hill is my parliamentarian. He's the guy that keeps me straight on everything. So, thank you. Okay, we have as part of the chief's report, is also the Rappahannock County Fire Rescue Association. If you don't know what that is, what you have are 7 companies in this county, and they together create what's called the Fire and Rescue Association. And so things that are common among the different departments or companies in the county are managed and handled by that group. There are operational things like we have to have fire hose testing done once a year. We want to make sure, essentially, that the fire hoses we use on the fire trucks are safe to operate with. We test ladders off of fire trucks on the aerial at Company 2, and we have those tested in the Fire Rescue Association manages those things on behalf of all the companies. So those things that have commonality in process, they handle. They have a meeting once a month. And so what I did, rather than try to interpret those meeting minutes, is, and I'll leave these available for anyone to read through, but we brought copies of the last 2 meeting minutes so that you could browse through and just get a sense of what kinds of things that they discussed during those meetings and the relevance of how they might apply to this company. Okay, questions? We're good so far? We're tracking all right? Okay. We don't have an EMS captain's report because right now we don't have an EMS captain. Now, a couple of reasons for that. One, we haven't had a meeting yet. We haven't had an election yet. We have 5 appointed board members. And so I'm of the school of thought that you don't put someone into a position to fill a position. You put someone in a position because they've earned the right to be in that position. They have the background, the business acumen, the certifications and credentials, and the experience on the road, out on the street, running those kinds of calls. So we will eventually have EMS and fire positions filled, but until such time that we get the right folks into those positions, they will remain vacant. Now, with that said, I mentioned that we have run, or we've been dispatched on 104 EMS calls since January 27th. We've made it out on 76 of those. It would be nice to say that we're 100% responsive. Not being able to have meetings, not being able to bring on board the new applicants that have applied, and we apologize for the delay, by the way, in the fact that this is your first meeting. Things are what they are when they get into a courtroom. Travis and I, it just happens. There was a consent order that kept us from having our meetings. But we apologize for the fact that some of you have been applicants for 4 or 5 months. I think Mike Sands was one of those very early adopters of applying, and it's 5 months later before he gets to sit in this room and actually attend the first meeting. And there are several of you like that. Neil Simons is someone. So we apologize for that, but that's just the due process of what we had to go through. But we were given a variance from the state to operate ambulance 1404, the ambulance that sits here, as driver only. Sean Colster in the very back corner of the room there. Everybody turn around and look at Sean. Make it embarrassing. Sean Colster, I can't tell you enough how instrumental he was in helping us get that ambulance back up and running. I think Doug Layton in Richmond and Mike Bird and others were shocked that between Sean and I and Gary Curry, we were able to get that ambulance up and running after almost a year of not being in service to being in service in 33 days. I mean, that's truly a Herculean lift. But there were caveats. Sean, am I on target? There are caveats to our ability to run that ambulance. One, whoever hosts the EMS license, and we're using the county's Rappahannock County Fire and Rescue Department license to run EMS calls. The caveat by the state and by their code is that the name of that license holder has to be on the side of the ambulance, which is the case today. Not a big deal. The other caveat is that in an emergency response situation, we could respond driver only. That's one person on the ambulance. That's not normal. But we have to meet ALS, or Advanced Life Support 1400, who is a county representative on the scene. And then if that medic needs an ambulance, guess what? They're jumping on board with us and we're running to a call. I'm going to ask Debbie Donahue to stand up, because this is a big deal for us. Debbie Donahue and I, thank you, Debbie. Debbie, am I embarrassing you?
No, yeah.
Okay. You just went red real quick.
Long time since Debbie's been there.
Debbie Donahue and I had come to the firehouse a couple of weeks ago to run an EMS call, and we got put in service almost immediately. We were here, we were actually doing more training. Debbie and I have been training together for quite a while, as had Swan and I and a few others, doing driver training for the ambulance. But Debbie and I were here and we were doing training, and we got dispatched on another call. Someone in distress over at Massey's Corner at 211 and Zachary Taylor Highway. And the paramedic jumped on board of our ambulance. We upgraded, and Tim made a comment, the first time he had ever heard, ambulance 1404, that's our call sign. Ambulance 1404 upgraded to medic 1404, and we transported the patient to the hospital. That was a good day for Debbie. She was the first person to be able to do that. It was during a driver training scenario, so I was with her. We walked each other through the process to make sure we're on the right track. And the patient was transported safely and securely, so good job, Debbie. So, with regard to our EMS license, if you don't know, March 22nd, 2022, this company lost their EMS license. Why is I think irrelevant, but the fact that it was lost. So we went for about 11 months with no EMS license. Sean and I and Gary worked together. We got that license where we could operate under theirs. We still don't have our EMS license. But our hope, I think our collective hope, is that we do the right thing. We run the calls, we're responsive, we fill out our reports correctly, we follow all the protocols that are required under EMS, and Dr. Jenks and others will decide that we get our EMS license back. We're on track for that, Gary, would you say? We're on track, we're not there, but we're on track to get there. And I think that's a very important thing for us to do. Likewise, on the fire side, if you ever hear, this is one of our Minotaur pagers, it's a dispatching aid. If you ever hear morning reports or evening reports, what you hear is that Company 4, along with one other company, are dual dispatch. What that means is that when we get a call, they automatically put the next closest company to that call with us. So we're sort of tagging along to the call. I would like to see us get off of dual dispatch. It's not something that we declare, it's something that the county makes a decision that we are offering our due diligence, we're doing the right things, we're running the right calls, and we're being responsive, and we will eventually get off of dual dispatch. So it's a big deal, and we're working towards those. Now, how do we do that? It's pretty straightforward. We do our job. We do the job that we signed up to volunteer for. It's work. It's you know, getting the training, getting the certification, and all the hours that you put into that process. It pays off when you save somebody's life. And all I can say is I hope that a lot of us step up and find some way, somehow, to contribute to the company. Bring old certifications with you, and we'll find a way to make them applicable here if we can. And we're glad to have the new applicants as part of this process because it fills a room. I will tell the new applicants specifically, company meetings here, before used to be a couple of small tables here. You could fit, what, 12 people, 13 people at the table? And Dave and I and the rest of the board talked about this the other day. Can't do that anymore. And what a great opportunity. If we have to rent a stadium to have our meetings, that's okay too. But we thank you for what you're doing and for stepping up and joining us. We have no committee reports, but we're working to form. So I should read the agenda since everybody hasn't seen it. The next item in the agenda is reports of standing committees and special committees. We haven't had the ability, as I mentioned, to have any meetings, but we are working to form committees because I think that's where everybody gets to contribute. Everybody gets to be a part of some process. I'll give you some examples. We have an apparatus committee. Those are people that are responsible to help keep the fleet up and running for the firefighters and the EMTs and everybody else. I have two people that stepped up early for the apparatus committee, Tom Lyons and Charles Ross. I don't know if everybody knows about Rock or not. But what they do is they work to make sure that those fire trucks and the ambulance and the utility are operational. If they need Virginia State inspection, if they need oil changes, they need tire changes, whatever it is that the apparatus needs, they sort of manage that process. What you'll hear over time is we're looking for an alternate for that group. Then we have a facilities committee. The facilities committee, did I see Jim Rubin in here? Yeah. And Bill, I thought I saw Phil in here somewhere. He's in there. There he is. He's so quiet. And another gentleman by the name of Drew Kaplan are on the facilities committee. And what they're going to do for us, these are sort of godsend committees for people on the board because it distributes roles and responsibilities and quite frankly gives authority to other folks to help keep this company running. But the facilities committee is going to focus on making sure that these buildings stay in good shape. If the roof's leaking, they'll make sure it gets done. Not that they're going to do the work, but that they're going to find the right people to get the work done. Then we're going to have a grounds committee. We're going to have a meal preparation committee because we hold different events here that just making meals is a big deal and a big time saving for the people that are operational that are running the calls. So anything, there are just so many things that we can do here that that'll be helpful. I had talked a while ago, it's been a while, Neil, that we talked about small tools. So if as an example, if the apparatus committee is responsible to keep the fire trucks and the ambulances running, then the small tools committee will take over when it has to do with things like axes and chainsaws and leaf blowers to make sure those things are functional. So we're divide and conquer approach to management of essentially everything that we've got here. So again, recruiting as many as we can, people that are willing, we're a representation of this community, and then giving them some authority and some responsibility in this company to help make a difference every day. It's a big deal. And I hope, as I stand here for the first meeting, that if you're on the apparatus committee or on the small tools committee, or if you're on grounds committee and you drive by here and you say, man, the yard looks great today. It's because of the work, or because the fire trucks ran properly. It's because of the work that you put into helping this company get back on its feet and manage its business. And there are a couple of people that will be watching you, just so you know. I say this jokingly. Richard, Brady, and he lives right next door, and Diane Carter lives right across the street. I asked Diane if she would consider being part of our supply committee. She's close by. If someone has an emergency and needs something from supply, she's sort of within reach to be able to help in that process. So as you start to see these committee notices being sent out, sort of keep an ear open. If you're interested in something like that, raise your hand. We'll find a way to make it. Is that fair? Are we good? Yes. Okay. Any questions? I should ask. Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering if it isn't breaking any confidences. Certainly you and your team have looked at the applicants and their qualifications. Some of us longer in the tooth people are very anxious that we have EMTs, an ambulance that works, that people can drive it. Are you hopeful, from looking at those applications, that you will have some people close to being qualified to run the EMS call?
Thank you. Great question, Richard. The answer is yes. I should have mentioned, and maybe I was missing this, but I've been training 3 new driver trainers for the ambulance specifically. And what happens is they, all of the people that want to drive a fire apparatus, and the apparatus ranges from a pickup truck all the way to the tanker, and there's 5 different vehicles in that fleet. So the applicant gets to decide. So as an example, Dave went through emergency vehicle operator course level 3. Patrick, I think you're level 3 as well. Level 3. Jen, I know level 3. Some folks level 3. We have people, I mean, level 2. You start to realize that there are a lot of people. Dwayne's just too shy. There are a lot of people that have the training, but what Debbie and Tim, Juana, and Chris Payne, who can't be here. He's the guy that's in Montana doing wildland firefighting. When they go through the training course, it's a 2 or 3 day course depending on what kind of training you're getting. When they get done with the certification, they get a state certification. You are hereby certified to drive a fire truck or an ambulance or whatever it is. Then the real training starts, I think, right? Would you all say? Because what I do with them, we want a higher level of assurance that these folks are trained to drive those ambulances in the worst case scenario. So what I start them on is a regimen of 10 hours of driver training after their certification. They drive me to the different area hospitals, all the way over to Warren County, Culpeper, Fauquier County, and Warren. And after those 10 hours of training with us together, we're talking about anything and everything from how to back the ambulance up, Debbie, to how how and where the equipment on the ambulance is, and how its basic function serves the call. And so we have 3 new driver trainers that have just gotten released, actually, Tim, Juan, and Debbie. And Chris will be the 4th here in a couple of days. So that means instead of Tim and I being the only 2 drivers, now we have 5. Before we had 2 CPR qualified folks, now we have 13. You see sort of where we're going with this. One of the classes that Darren and Sean and I are working on is hosting a EMT class here. Normally, they're done through the association, as I mentioned, but with this influx of applicants, you really want to start hosting classes here so that we can get people turned over quickly. As an example, firefighter class, the cycle is typically 1 class a year. Is that fair, Gary? 1 class a year for firefighter level 1. Well, what we talked about is I went out of that cycle, went to Fauquier County, where they were going to host a firefighter level 1, level 2 class, and through Dale Kidwell, agreed to let us have a couple of his training slots. So that gets firefighters into that class, same state certification at the end of the process. And so it ramps up our qualified candidates pretty quickly. So, Richard, to your question, it's a long answer, but we're absolutely focused on not just getting the ambulance running, it's getting EMTs on board. Dr. Rosemont, she's down in the pub. She was an EMT here before. Kat, as we call her, Catherine, and I have known each other for 27 years. I know you're not that old, I know I am. But we knew each other in Prince William County, I'll say a lifetime ago, and actually ran out of the same firehouse in Prince William County. But she's coming back on board as an EMT. We have Dr. Hill, we have, I believe, another doctor that's in the group. We have a physician's assistant. We're working to find, now that we're through this first hurdle, finding ways to get them trained quickly to get them on the road, because that's our goal, right? And what that does, we hope, is for the county and for Dr. Jenks, our operational medical director or direction position, hopefully gives them the level of confidence to give us back our license and we can just start running these calls as we see fit. Does that answer your question?
It certainly does, but it makes me think that you might want to consider having a training officer as chief. You're going to have some responsibilities besides training.
Yes, actually, that's sort of part of the agenda is to start to delegate as much as we can. As an example, Tim's one of these unique people. He's been in fire service for a very long time. He actually has his commercial driver's license, and so he's got the skill set and the requisite training skills to help teach other drivers. So leveraging people like Tim and others is absolutely essential. Yeah, but that's where the committees and everything else come in. Let's delegate as much as we can so that a few of us can focus on the things that we really need to do. Is there any unfinished business?
I could just build on what you just said just a little bit, and make it very clear. The county, the board of supervisors, has committed to fund any training needed for volunteer fire and rescue, any company in the county. Just need people to absorb that training. Training is not a barrier from the perspective of funding, access to classes. As Chief noted, Darren and Sean have saw fit to have our own county staff trained so they can do some of the training here. So we just need people. And it's amazing that you've shown up here today for Flint Hill, and I hope there's a similar influx of volunteers and other companies as well. But you have to let the chief know that you're interested. And it's hard to push training, but if you pull it, we will feed it as fast as possible.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. All right, for our members, any unfinished business?
So just indulge me for a second. I'm going to use new business as my moniker to say this. Dave, or Chief, he drills with a lot of praise among all of us, but I just want to publicly say, none of this happens without a chief, and it takes many, many years to get to that level within the firefighting community, and so, and Dave has gone above and beyond what you would expect. He's worked many late nights, all weekend, 7 days a week, running most of the calls. If you look at the call roster, who else been running calls, I've run a few, and he can say that that's great for me. He's run all of them, basically, pretty much. So I just want to give public acknowledgement that he's been sort of the catalyst that sort of gotten us to this point, and we all appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Yes. Following the agenda, so thank you, very much, and thank you. As far as the announcements go, as we get ready to close the meeting, we have a fire levy board meeting coming up. If you don't know what the fire levy board is or what it does, as residents, if you are a property owner, you, in the tax you pay, some portion of it, maybe a small portion of it, is fire levy. And there is a board assembled in the county. What's that? Yes. But at the county, they've established what they call the fire levy board. The fire levy board essentially monitors, and I'll call it governs, but I use that term very loosely, the distribution of the fire levy board, or the fire levy. And so what we do, what Patrick and Dave and others do, is submit our operational costs. So the county covers operational costs, the company covers capital costs. And so twice a year, we submit receipts essentially and evidence of operational expenses under $10,000 per incident. And we can request reimbursement for that, for a variety of different things. The power bill, the water bill if we had one, we don't, but if we did, small incidental things. If we're going to have the fire truck service, those kinds of things get reimbursed. So that fire levy board is coming up. I don't have a date. Gary, do you by chance have a date?
I'm not established at this time.
Okay, but it's coming up, and it's about this time of the year. So if you have questions about fire levy board, maybe in a couple of weeks, you can find one of the board members, and we'll be able to provide you information about how that is going. Today we had a non-start kickoff meeting for the calendar year 2022 financial statement audit. And it's, I say a non-start because the kickoff meeting was scheduled for this morning. It didn't happen, so they're going to move that meeting. One of Gary's team is going to announce a new meeting, and our president, acting president, will attend that meeting to make sure that we have a solid start towards supporting the financial statement audit for 2022. So that's last year. Next is, I've asked Pastor Dave Flanagan, if you would, sir, stand up. Pastor Dave Flanagan is pastor at Abundant Life Church in Rappahannock, Virginia. And he was here just a couple of weeks ago. If you experienced any part of the revival that they call it the camp, the church camp, they had out here in the yard, in our firehouse yard. They were here a couple of weeks ago. Debbie Donahan and I talked about it. We just thought it would be a really good idea to have a blessing of the fire trucks. Thank you, Pastor Dave. But we'll have that event immediately following this meeting. So I hope that you'll stick with us. We have a couple of the fire truck and the ambulance outside to kick that process off. I'm sure you know this just by default of living in any community, but when what we call tones being dropped, that is, these things go off, or our cell phones go off because we have applications that give us information about dispatched calls. The risk to the people that are running calls starts that second, and I don't take that lightly. I just read an article about a state trooper that was injured responding to a call. It happens like that. When you decide that you're going to become an operational member, you do accept a certain level of risk. Now, it's managed risk. We know how to manage that risk, but there is inherent risk nonetheless. Sometimes people pull over for lights and sirens, and sometimes they don't. And you hope that they respect those lights and sirens to the point that they handle it in such a way that it was their call, that they want us on the scene as quickly as we can absolutely get there. And so having a blessing of the fire trucks, and by default, those who ride on those fire trucks and ambulances, is just absolutely vital. It truly is. I and Debbie both agree that it's just such an important aspect of what we're trying to do. Debbie's used the expression, I like it. I promised her I'd make her a t-shirt one day, and I'm sorry I haven't done that. But we say the rising of the phoenix. If you want the rising of the phoenix out of the ashes, is this revitalization of this company is paramount to this community. We're here, as you've heard hopefully during this meeting, we're here to make sure the same goal that Gary Curry and I talked about probably on day one of this whole appointment is that we're going to provide trained, equipped, and ready volunteers to support and serve the community in their time of need. And that's what we're here, and that's what we hope that we've signed up for. So the blessing of the fire trucks is an important, I think, important aspect of this. Our next membership meeting is August the 7th at 7 p.m. in this room. Unless we just grow out of this room, which would be a wonderful thing. So tell a friend, let them know that they are welcome to join. One of the constraints in the court order was that we couldn't spend money outside of emergency needs. So putting batteries in fire trucks was important. Buying t-shirts for firefighters, less important, not an emergency. But once we get through the hurdle of knowing everyone that's joining the company, and once we have that list solidified, we'll order some t-shirts, and you'll be able to walk in here with pride wearing your department t-shirt and showing that you support the community. Any questions?
So, maybe adjourn and then we'll take questions and comments from the public?
Okay. Move to adjourn, second?
Yes.
Second?
Yes, please.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you. So now, meeting's over. Anybody have any questions? This is a free-for-all. I'm happy.
You don't have to be a member.
Yes, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Yes, sir.
And for the whole board. I mean, this is a great beginning for a group. What's a desired membership number? How many members does a volunteer fire department usually have?
That
Should they have?
That's a hard question to answer, and I'm going to answer it a little bit differently than giving you a direct answer. Here's what I mean. If we had a crew on duty today to get the tanker out, the fire truck out, and the ambulance out. On the ambulance, we'd have preferred a driver, an EMTB, a basic EMT, and a paramedic. That gets our ambulance out the door. On the tanker, I'd have the driver, pump operator, and I'd have someone as a second to that person. Because in a tanker operation, you're dragging hose and you're making connections and doing things. So you got two people there. On a fire truck, I'd like to see, and I've discussed this before, I'd like to have at least 4 people on a fire truck. I'd have a driver, pump operator, a qualified officer, a qualified interior firefighter, and potentially a red hat, what we call a recruit or probationary member. The recruit is dragging hose, helping the firefighter get dressed to get in the building, do those kinds of things. But the officer and the firefighter are going into the building. So you've got somebody managing the pump, you've got people doing this. If you add to that, the command officer, say, in the county, it's firefighter level 1 and above can take command, I believe. I'd like to see somebody a little more qualified if I'm going into that building running command, but the idea is to have a command officer also. So when you add that up, I think you have about 8 or 9 people for a crew. Now, you don't want to burn those people out, so what you do is you have multiple crews of that. They start learning together, they train together, they know how each other functions, and before you know it, you've got 20, 30 people or more staffing the equipment out there on any, well, over the course of days, right? So you got 8 or 9 at a shot. So if you're doing that, and this is where the committees become so important, because if you've got 7 or 8 or 9 people running the fire trucks and the ambulances, do you really want them to have the burden of cutting the grass or making sure the roof's not leaking? I mean, that's where the committees and the support agents of this company become such a vital part of the organization. Mike, does that answer?
If I may.
Yes.
If I may, it may be implied, what we'd like to have, like, I know that I'm on duty these 2 days this week, or these 3 days next week, because not everybody's superhuman and can do it 7 days a week.
Well, I'm not superhuman, I just have a very upset wife. But it would be nice, I'll tell you, I joked with Debbie when she asked me to take this job, that the second I said yes is the last time I had a drink. Just a bourbon and a cigar or something. I stopped that because, and Tim will tell you, we're on call all the time. And if we're gonna be responsive to you as a community, you give that kind of stuff up. So it'd be nice to have a night off and have a bourbon and a cigar. You'd probably be upset if you drove past the firehouse and you see me out there with a bourbon and a cigar. So I'm not gonna be doing that. But it'd be nice to have a night off or a couple of nights off. We'll evolve to that. So I talked about 3 phases in the revitalization plan. The first phase, the first 60 days was stabilization. The next phase was training, certification, and all that. There's actually a 3rd phase, and that's year 1 through year 2. And that's where we get to staffing crews and having people on duty. In that first year, in theory, we've trained a lot of people. Now, we've done a lot in the last few months, but we can train a lot more folks with the help of the county and Gary Curry, Darren Stevens, and Sean Polster, and others, like the Fauquier Training Center. And there are others. I'm friends with a lot of the fire chiefs around here. Sean and I know a lot of the same folks. We reach out to all of them. We're quite a tight network of people that share those training resources to make sure that we can offer the training that you need, that we need. So the more people we get trained, as we find these unique skill sets, better off we are as a community. Any other questions?
Mike.
Yes.
Our bylaws have, need some work. So, we've got certain committees that are outlined within the bylaws themselves. So there's an entertainment committee, there's the bylaws committee, there's the buildings and grounds committee, which we've already, started working on. So there's a lot of opportunities that we have that we need folks to fill. So it's not just operational, on the operations side. It really is the entire organization. And I think, with such a small crew that we've had in the past, a lot of people get burned out and then they kind of move on and rock. With a crew like this, I mean, I'm just amazed. I've never seen this room filled like this before. And, it's just, heartwarming to see everybody here. So thank you for doing that. But there are opportunities. We have plenty of opportunities. And Chief Gerald can, help put you in those spots and Dave. So, don't think that there's just the operational side, which is what we would love to have you doing, because this man right here cannot be burned out any more than he is.
I'll give you an example of one, what you would think is a very insignificant thing. Jim Dearden and I talk about flag protocols. When the flag goes up and down the pole, half-staff because of some issue, those tiny little things where somebody on the board doesn't have to come in from home because somebody else lives close by and they can just take care of it. But they're at sunrise, they make sure the flag is positioned to half-staff if that's the situation. And then at night, take it down. Myself, I don't live in your first due. I'm sure if you've watched any board of supervisor meeting, I got ringed almost, wouldn't you say, Karen? To some degree about not living in this first due. I actually live in Sperryville. So when a call comes out, if it's late at night, I'm driving from Sperryville here, and typically I'm meeting Tim and Dave and others to run the call, to the point where I was going to rent somebody's basement out just to have a place here. But maybe Bubby will let me just sleep in the garage or something. Not an option. But we truly have a great opportunity here. You know, I joke with Bubby, but he's become a very dear friend. And when he and I talked about membership, I asked him, Bubby, you can tell me, you can hold me true. I asked him, I said, have you ever been a member of the Flint Hill Fire Company? He said, no. I said, had you ever considered being a member of the Flint Hill Fire Company? He said, no. The man's been here his whole life. His business, his livelihood is right down the street. His entire family is in this county. And so when we started talking, without hesitation, I had the entire 3 generations of settled at the front door, if you remember that morning. His son Lee is one of the names on this list. And proudly, his grandson Elijah is on the list as well. So 3 generations signing up for this company at one time is a pretty cool thing. Now I'll tell you, his son Lee, he already puts his life on the line every day. I'm sure Dad gets worried at times. But he's a deputy. He was a deputy here, now a deputy in Fauquier County, and has done amazingly well. And I know Dad's proud about that, but he's even willing to step up and try and find a way to make the time to get the training that's needed. So we have some great folks here. And again, for all of you, we applaud you for stepping up and being a part of this. We are a sampling of the community. We truly are. And if this is a sample of Flint Hill and Huntley area, I say God bless us, and we're doing good. So. Any other questions? Any other comments? Yes, sir. Phil.
Dave, what is the background check procedure?
The background check, if I may repeat the question, the background check procedure, if you haven't already gone through it, Tim has been phenomenal in helping people get through that process. What you do, first and foremost, you affiliate to the Rappahannock County Fire and Rescue Department. Affiliation really is you're signing up to be a part of that process. Then you do what's called a field print. Field print is a fingerprint check. It's just a very cursory background check. And what they do is they take the fingerprints. They don't actually, I think fingerprints in the old days, right, the ink and all that, that's not the case anymore. You put your fingerprints on glass, they scan them, and they send them through whichever chosen venue you use. Typically, it's the UPS store. They send it to the state police. State police does a check. They send the results to Gary Curry and his team. And
We don't see the background, we just
see the results.
Eligible, that's all.
Yes. Yeah, they get an eligible or ineligible result. And that's essentially the extent of the background check. It's simple. Now, the police record. So, I'm sorry?
Driving.
Right, and that's the second part of this is what we track is, does the person have CPR? And if you don't, we'll help get you CPR training. And then the driving record from whichever state you reside. So as an example, Dr. Hill brought me his from Maryland. Most of us, it's a Virginia DMV check. You can do that yourself. You log on to Virginia DMV, ask for a 5 or a 7 year copy. You can ask for it to print yourself, so you print it to your local printer. You bring it in, I enter it into a system. So Sean Polster a while ago set up a sort of a SharePoint of sorts, and they track some parts of it, I track some parts of it. So they track affiliation, and all your names are in that because you've applied to the company. They track affiliation and the background check. I track CPR training, your DMV check, and then we have a repository that's set up for each one of you to put those files into. A fifth thing that we track, but I track, is whether or not you've been EVOC trained, that's the emergency vehicle operator trained, and whether or not you've been released. So you go to the training, as I mentioned, you get your certification. That doesn't mean you can start driving ambulances or fire trucks the next day. You have to go through an iteration of in-house training. It's essentially building confidence for the driver and for the chief. So we go through that. It's a really simple process. Affiliation is that. Background check typically is just a few days. And then really the challenge in our case is waiting for the next CPR class. But I'm working with Darren and with Sean on those things now.
One quick thing, can I add?
Yes.
I don't want to keep this going, just one quick thing. We do follow HIPAA and the Virginia State records management processes. So all of your records are kept under lock and key, 2 locks, behind a locked door, and then in a locked cabinet. So we don't want you to think that any of your information gets out. We take that very seriously. And we don't let anyone who's not a board member or member of the company enter that office. So seriously, we do take that seriously and want you to feel comfortable about that.
Yeah, the door's not normally left open, but there's an air conditioner in there and it's blowing cool air. So Patrick came in earlier and found that this room was a little bit warmer than it should have been. So he started up a bunch of processes to get it cooled down. Any other questions?
And I am happy to help anybody that would like to affiliate. They can, so just see Chief General.
Folks, our goal is first and foremost to support the community. It's really that simple in their time of need. They call us when the things get worse for them. I wrote something down because I just thought it was profound, and hopefully it resonates with you. But